Go for it.
All right. So what we're talking about here today is the Project Catalyst team's proposal, which we call Catalyst Voices, which is at some level an Ideascale replacement, but it is also kind of much more than that. And I want to try and help you guys understand what it is that we're actually proposing and what it means in the context. And I'd like to call out Mike for actually preparing most of these slides. So thanks, Mike. Next slide. All right. So part of this, Catalyst Voices has come out of, our analysis of since Fund 9 to now of what's the pain. We all know what the pain is: fragmented experience. We have to share emails to do certain things. There's a lack of clarity on how we implement new features or how the system could grow. What we want to get to is, and the value case is a unified experience with end-to-end capabilities for voters, reps, proposers, and other roles as we automate those and bring those into the community. We want, roles to be wallet-based role registration, access control, so that we can have auditable and private user accounts, to basically extend the voter experience where we're using registrations to register voters to all of the other roles. And we want a completely open source foundation and modular platform that we can build on. That's both front end and back end. Next slide, please. So clearly we've got a very fragmented experience. Everybody understands it. We don't really need to dig into it in detail, but we've got all these different tools that don't really interface well together. You've got Ideascale, which APIs are kind of a bit meh, right, to be nice, right? We've got, community tools created by Darlington and others, and they have difficulty interfacing to these systems. And we have, currently we have things like Git Servicing Station, which serve Catalyst data from the back ends, but every fund it changes or you lose fund data. So we've got this, this disconnect in all of the different steps of Catalyst. And this is, historical. This is because the system has been built as an experiment. And, it was like, okay, we'll use this piece and then we'll use this piece and we'll get this thing working this way. But, we reach Fund 9, we're kind of at scale where we need to be, we need to get serious about how Catalyst is put together and how we operate it. And so a huge piece of the, the Fund 9 to Fund 10 gap has been this analysis and working out what can we do to improve the system and improve community engagement and community accessibility to the systems. So next slide. So this is what, at its most superficial level, we're talking about unifying the experience. So in the testnet, which we've launched, soft launched today, I mean, it's launched, you can go to I can't remember the exact URL, but testnet dot something or other, projectcatalyst.io, I think. And you can actually, or app.testnet.projectcatalyst.io, and you can actually see what we have here, which is a proof of concept voting, web-based voting app with DREPs. Now, this is not something that we're actually going to push to production, and we're going to deal with that more in the Q&A section of why that might be. But we've launched it so that we can give you an example of what interacting with our APIs would look like, how DREPs would work in the original scheme, and why we're thinking about they need to be changed. And it gives you an example of using the Wallet Connect and all of these other things that we've developed with the two wallets that journeyed with us to actually trial some of this stuff. So this is actually in testnet's context. So while the system isn't something we actually want to push to production, it's actually something that we want the community to test and to experiment with and to get an idea of, so that when we're talking to you about, okay, we didn't like this in registration, you can actually go and see that. And you can actually say, well, yeah, actually, we see the problem that you're understanding now. And we wouldn't really understand these problems if we hadn't built this proof of concept, this system, because building the system and trialing it is part of the exploratory process to say, do these ideas work? Where do they not work? Where could they be improved? Is this something we'd be willing to go to production with? And so, building on top of testnet, and that's kind of how we want this to go, so that we actually get this, this tighter feedback loop between what we're building and what's actually production ready. But you can trial the features that we're proposing here. So you'll be able to check your voting power live. You'll be able to delegate to a representative. You'll be able to browse and edit and submit proposals. In this environment, you can't edit, but you can browse. So this is sort of, to give you a feel for what it could look like and for us to, to do live experiments on. Next slide, Danny. So what we're actually proposing is not only unifying the experience, but unifying the registrations and the role-based access control so that, we've got a back end. It doesn't need to know your username and password because you don't have one. All it needs to know is that if you're submitting a proposal, you're authorized to submit your proposal, that your proposal is authentically from you, that if you're reviewing, that you are authentically you that's submitting the review and not somebody else. So all we need to do is track that, the authenticity of your data. We don't need to track actually who you are. You can optionally declare who you are because you may want to for your particular role, but that's up to you. So for people to comment, we want to tie that into the voters. So if you're a registered voter, you can provide a comment and you just sign that like you would signing your vote, except you're signing your comment. So that way, it's hard for people to just go and create shill accounts and create lots of comments because they have to be a registered voter. They have to have stake. So it's a way of tying up your identity. You've got skin in the game. You're actually part of the Catalyst ecosystem. You're not just some random dude coming in here and trolling for the lols. So we're trying to tie the system up nicely and to have, a kind of unified experience for the registrations on top of the API. Next slide. So this is a series, Danny, so you just step through them and I'll just talk to them. This is going to expose itself as they go. So just keep stepping. So we take privacy pretty seriously in Catalyst, and we want to improve on the state of privacy at every step we make if we can. So anytime somebody says to me, let's build a Project Catalyst system and we'll use usernames and passwords, I immediately push back and go, we don't want that. We don't want usernames and passwords. We don't need it for voting. We shouldn't need it for anything else. But there's a tension there, right? Because we still need to have accountability. So how do we maintain privacy without sacrificing accountability? So just keep stepping through, Danny, because this is going to expose. So we're going to use wallet-based user accounts, effectively an extension of the voting registration, but there's more to it than that. So for example, voting, your voting key isn't you don't sign your registration with your voting key. I want to actually make it so that for key registrations, you're actually signing the registration with both your role key, so in this case a voting key, or say a proposer's key, as well as your stake key, so that it's clear that you do control that particular role's key, that somebody isn't trying to say, my stake address, but I'm going to use Darlington's key for, I'm going to use Darlington's stake address, but here's my key for pretending to be a voter, right? Or pretending to be a proposer. It's Darlington's stake address, it's Darlington's proposer key. And his registration, if he did that, would sign both with those. So it's a way of us securing the loop. We actually don't have that at the moment, and that's why we have a problem with, in my opinion, we have a security problem with DREPs, because there's no way currently for a DREP to assert, this is my DREP key categorically. Right? Just like there's no, so the problem with that is it creates security loopholes and these weird things called shadow DREPs, where you can, pretend to be a DREP, but you're not really, and there's no real distinction between voters and DREPs currently in the registration model. So we want to tie that up and actually fix this so that DREPs are a specific role, voters are a different role. Voters delegate to DREPs, and they know they're doing that because DREPs are a special registration. They're not just a voter, right? We don't want people to be able to delegate to voters. And one of the reasons for this is we want to have different rules for different roles. So DREPs, when they vote, one of the ideas is that they would have their votes exposed at the end of the election so that people could say, okay, this DREP represented they were going to vote in a particular way on particular topics. Well, they need to be held accountable for that. If the votes were totally private, they could tell you they're going to vote one way and actually use your voting power to vote no on all of these proposals that they actually didn't want to get up, which is counter to what they actually said. So, but you don't want to do that for voters. You want voters to be completely private. So we kind of need to keep the roles separate and clearly distinguishable. We want people to know if they're assigning their voting power to a rep, that they are actually doing that, not to somebody else who's just a voter. So we want to be able to keep the user, despite user privacy, the community will be fully armed with an audit trail for all Catalyst participation that leads back to verifiable registrations on Cardano mainnet. So this is actually the kind of the core of Catalyst Voices, is we want to build this registration system. We want to build it with the community. So we've actually got a 3-month window of defining this. Now I've fleshed out, a high level outline of how this will work, and we'll publish this, at the beginning of this proposal process, at the beginning of this process, when we, if this proposal stands up. And then we want to iterate with the community and actually say, okay, so this is what we're proposing. This is the registration format. These are the scenarios. This is how we think it can work. This is how we think it could work with other DApps, not just Catalyst, because we don't want to just build this just for Catalyst. If we can build a generalized role-based registration system, we figure that there may be uses in other DApps that have, similar problems. They want to have roles for their users, so they should be able to reuse the same tooling. So we really do want this to be a fully collaborative process. We want people who are technical in the community to actually review it, to provide feedback, and for us to get the best possible role-based access control system we can build. Right? Having got that, we'll go through the SIP process, and while that's going through the SIP process, we'll actually implement the Catalyst Voices backend security with it. Next slide, Danny. And we'll build the front end that uses it. And so Catalyst Voices, while it will unify the front end experience in this case, the initial one will be unified proposals and voting into the one interface. Because we're going to use this decentralized role-based system, somebody else will be able to access exactly the same APIs with exactly the same permissions as the Catalyst front end that we're going to build for Catalyst Voices. So it breaks that, but you guys have special access because you've got access to all of the authorities. All the user accounts. Well, no, actually, there are no real user accounts. There are just registrations and roles. So every app that accesses the backend can have exactly the same power as any other. So it means that we can level the playing field for access to this data and for updates. So I was playing with Darlington's new system, right? Darlington wants to access those APIs, and he wants to allow people to enter proposals in his system. He can, right? He will have exactly the same access as us. There'll be no special use case. There'll be no special users. And for us, that's kind of key for us to be able to build together, is that we need to make sure that all the APIs and all the systems are level, that what we build isn't just, only we can really actually meaningfully build on it. That's kind of nonsensical. So Catalyst Voices, we're going to build an Ideascale replacement. It's not really, there's work in it, right? There's work. But it's not really that complex to build an Ideascale replacement. It's form editing, it's validation, there's some other things, but at its core, it's not that hard. But getting it right so that we can have 3 or 4 Ideascale replacements all working with the same data with equal authority, that's a bit harder. That's where the challenge is in this proposal, and that's what we're trying to set up, so that it is now an open ecosystem. We can have multiple front ends and they all have parity. And in fact, if you have co-proposers, there's no reason why I couldn't be working with Low Donations front end and Danny's working with the Catalyst front end. We should still be able to work together, and it not matter what front end we're using. So that's the kind of interoperability we want to see. Next step. So the module-based approach is there to make it easy to integrate new experiences and ongoing improvements, so that we're going to define a role-based system. We're going to have 3 or 4 roles to begin with, but now if we want to add a new role, it's really easy. We just say, okay, we've got a new role. Now we can build business logic around that role. It also means, because it's tied to your stake address, you could register for a number of roles, and the interface can actually detect that and go, oh, you're a registered proposer, you're a registered voter, you're a registered reviewer. You can get an interface that actually gives you access to the things that you're registered to do. So you don't need to tell it. The interface can actually detect that from your registrations. If you're not a registered reviewer, well, you don't need any of the review functions. But if you are, well, you get all those review functions. So it allows you through your registrations to actually control the experience that you have access to. Next slide. And we want to develop it in a completely open way so that it's fully open for external contributors, because that's our driving motivation is opening up the ecosystem at all levels. Next step. And so decentralized authorizations, it really does allow us to have independent front ends that we can develop against the same APIs with 100% feature parity based on our reference implementation. And that's really what the Catalyst Voices will be, is a reference implementation. So as we add new modules and we start, adding more features to capture more of the process of operating Catalyst, Catalyst Voices will just be one of the possible reference implementations for it. Next. So the roadmap, it's kind of broken into 3 rough stages, but the full roadmap you'd see in the milestones. The first start is where we set up all the open source stuff. We're going to develop this completely in the clear from day one. So there'll be no sudden reveal at the end. Every step of the way, we'll be building the code in the public eye. And it's just this first stage is really to refine and to work out exactly what these registrations are going to look like, to get community feedback both from Catalyst and the wider community about how these registrations could work and how they can be improved. To get wallet support for these, there's going to have to be, extensions to either SIP62 or, wallet support to actually do some of the things I want to do, like encryption, so that we could work on encrypted proposals and not have to share keys with the central authority, so that, 2 proposals can come together, they can share encrypted data that's completely between them until they're ready to publish it. That's the world I want to see. So we're going to have to do some wallet integration there. So that's kind of the first step. And once we've built the first step, then we head into the next step, which is where we do the voting and the delegation part, because that's kind of the next most logical step. And then on top of that, we build the proposal submission and commentary. So this 3-stage approach will deliver it progressively, and we'll deliver it continuously to testnet as we stand up the system.
Yeah.
So even though
apologies,
Yep.
Stephen. We're gonna have a situation. One of our co-hosts has accidentally closed all of the rooms. I don't have any buttons to abort, unfortunately. So what will happen is that all of us, as we are in all the breakout rooms, will actually end up in the main room, and we'll have to reopen them. So
all right, we'll come back to this one.
We have about 15 seconds. So there is what was it? Commercial break, everybody.
How is it there's no button to abort?
There's no button to abort. I mean, like you would think Ideascale doesn't have issues like this thing. That same thing.
What happened?
All right. Well, there seems to be a commercial break. Apparently, one of our co-hosts, unfortunately, may have hit close all rooms instead of closing their own.
Who's that person?
We're not going to point fingers. We'll probably never know unless they come forward, but it's okay. We should be probably able. Lucas, are you still with us?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
you're
here.
funny.
All right. Would you
I
be
just
able to
gotta-
reboot us and send us back
just-
into
Just open them.
All right. So the rooms are open back in. Commercial break is over. Let's go back to those conversations. See you there.
Support.
Mastodon's good, but it's still federated.
That's true. Yeah.
All right. So I think the recording's back. Let me share the screen. Is it loading? Okay. Off you go. That was a good stretch. Why not? I'm like, today it's just going lovely. I'd say.
We can skip to the next slide, Danny.
Go for it.
So, we'll share this deck, but we've got, bridging the gap. We've got video overviews of our current prototypes, where we're at, what they do. An overview of the voting center that we're running live in testnet right now. An overview of our snapshot module, proof of concept that enables us to verify registration status and check voting power, and links to the current mobile apps, and GitHub links to all of the Catalyst core code, which you can actually run locally. And that's an ongoing, improving state as we further develop some of these features. So Catalyst Voices is really focused, and that's the end of the presentation. If you go to the next slide, Danny, it should just finish. Yeah, so thank you. So Catalyst Voices is really focused on registrations and the front end. And it's a standalone proposal all by itself, and it works. We have got a second proposal, which I'm not going to really talk about in detail here, which we call Hermes and Athena. The proposal title is, Catalyst Ecosystem Accelerator. So while Catalyst Voices actually allows us to build all of these extra front ends, that have feature parity and have all the main, have the same capabilities. What the other proposal seeks to do is actually decentralize the back end completely, so that rather than having a service that provides that those APIs and everybody can access them equally, actually the API is now decentralized fully. So we'll touch on that proposal in a separate meeting, because it deserves its own space. But I just want to say, so what these two proposals are complementary, but they do both stand alone. So I'd like to open the floor to questions, or to, if you want any more detail on, because I kind of went through it pretty quick, but I'd rather have a talk to you guys rather than lecture you. Anything?
The bit I'm most interested in is the how you're maintaining the role-based access,
Yes.
and preventing ghost accounts being created. I'm still trying to get my head around how exactly it's going to pull together.
All right. So do you know how the current voter registrations work?
I've seen them from a registration side of things.
Okay, so the voter registration on chain is metadata, and it's so what we have in there is, we have ostensibly, we've got a voting key which is separate from your normal account keys in Cardano, and the reason for that is we don't want them to be used for the wrong purpose. So you have a key for voting that can only be used for voting. You can't use it to transfer ADA. Right? The registration actually associates the voting key with your public stake address, with your public staking key, and that's how we calculate voting power. So we use the public staking key. We go and look for, at a particular point in time, all of the UTXOs that are associated with that key, and then we assign that voting power that we calculate there to that voting key. And so now when you sign a vote, you're actually signing it with the voting key. And so the only way that can happen is because we're only publishing the public voting key, somebody would need to get your private voting key in order to vote for you.
Replicate.
Okay, so it's just as secure as your ADA keys. It's just a different key for doing that. So we're going to extend that concept and say, now you say you want to register as a proposer, and we'll keep it simple. All right, you'll have a single proposer's key, distinct from your voting key, and you'll make a registration that says, I am registering as a proposer, this stake address to this proposer's key. Now, that could be, you could say, I don't want to use the same, staking account for voting and proposing. I actually want to keep those two separate. So you could create two separate wallets, and you could register them independently, and that's up to you. So, and we don't currently have any rules that say, a proposer must have a certain amount of stake, but we could. So we could say that, similar to voting, well, you must have 500 ADA at the cutoff time for when proposers are registered. So, it's kind of similar to where we do snapshots for voters. For these different roles, we will actually have different cutoff points where, If you're registered for that role before that time, you're included as that role for the processing that's coming up. And if you register after, well, you'll get included in the next time that role can actually be used. One of the reasons we want to do that is we want to be able to say things like, and a perfect use case is delegates. So we want to be able to lock in the delegate. I'm a registered delegate. We want to lock you in before voters have to be locked in, so that the voters know these delegates are locked in. They're not going to disappear out from underneath me 5 minutes before the voting starts, which could happen if they can all register and deregister and carry on at the same time. So we want to be able to, have the flexibility to say, okay, what are the parameters for this? And we work this out with the community. So maybe, 2 weeks before voting registration finalizes for a particular fund, maybe that's when delegate registration finishes, so that people have 2 weeks to actually go, oh yes, my delegate is locked in. I know their keys, that I know they can't change them because they are locked in. And I can, I can be sure that delegate is going to be there, that, how much voting power they've got assigned to them, because there's rules about how much voting power any one delegate can consume, right? So, similar sorts of things to voters, right? So proposers, we could say, if you want to be a proposer, you've got to have 500 ADA in your wallet, just like a voter. So it becomes then, if you want to create plenty of accounts, well, you can, but they're all got to have 500 ADA at the cutoff time. Otherwise, they're not going to be counted as a valid proposer. Now, these numbers I'm using, I'm just throwing them out there as examples. What the real parameters will be, that's something we'll have to work out as a community. What are the thresholds? What are the limits? What are the controls we want to put on it? But unless we have an actual registration on chain, well, we can't have any controls. The moment I can go on and make 1,000 Ideascale accounts, all I need is 1,000 Gmail accounts. And how hard is that? Not very.
Yeah.
Right. So, Stephen, will each role be a separate registration in the scheme? Is that one I just heard?
Every role will be a separate registration, separately managed.
A separate key.
With a separate key, yes.
And I'm assuming that this would be the SIP 36. Is that a SIP 36 or is this a new SIP?
It'll be a new SIP. So my intention would be to basically obsolete SIP 36 when we do this, because this replaces what SIP 36 does. And it's a logical extension of SIP 36. I'm not just going to come in here and redesign the whole thing. I've looked at SIP 36. I've looked at where I think its security flaws are, which are in this area where we don't actually know what role you're trying to be in the case of delegates and voters. And it can't be extended to all these other roles like proposers or assessors or, all of the other things we could possibly think of in the community. And there's lots. I mean, we're just talking about a small number of roles. There's things that we talked about in the original research, like tally committees and, there's all these different things that the community could actually do. Unless we can get a handle on how do you register to be in these groups, it becomes hard to actually even implement these systems, let alone think about how, right? So the idea here is let's build once this role-based system that we can use and extend it. And it's got flexibility that we can say, okay, well, these are the rules we want for this kind of role. These are the rules we want for that kind of role. And we can use the same registrations. We just put rules around it and go, this role in my DApp must be like this. This role in this other DApp, totally different, could be a different way. And it's up to them to manage what their rules are for their registrations and their roles. But we can do it with a uniform format. That's kind of the idea. Right. One of the key things which is important, I think, is for us to be able to transact data privately. So we want to be able to allow using the same role. So if I'm registered as a proposer, I want to be able to register a group of proposers, co-proposers. So the way that would work, say me, Darlington and Danny decide we're going to be co-proposers. We've all got our individual proposers registrations. Now we all go and post a second registration, which is for our group. So I post my key and Darlington's and Danny's. And Darlington says, yeah, I'm in that group. So he posts again and he posts my key, his key and Danny's, and he signs it with his key. And so when Danny finally does his registration and says, yep, Stephen's key, Darlington's key and my key, and he signs his, we now have an authority that goes, actually, we did a multi-sig, but we did it in 3 transactions independently, where I'm saying I trust Darlington and Danny. Darlington's saying he trusts me and Danny, and Danny's saying he trusts all 3 of us. The registration can actually come together and check that and go, you've all trusted one another, therefore we're going to let you work together as co-proposers. And so then you'll be able to, using that same data, we'll actually be able to exchange encrypted information. So I'll be able to sign data that's from me and then encrypt it so that only Darlington and Danny can read it. So as we're ideating on our proposal and we're working it out in our draft, we can do that completely privately until the point where we're like, okay, let's publish this. Right. So this is the kind of power I want to build into it, because we don't want, another way to do it facilely is to have it in the back end and say, oh, well, we'll just keep them all secret in the back end. But we're Catalyst. We actually run the back end at the moment. So as the Catalyst operator, we don't really want to see your draft proposals that you're working in isolation. You need to see them. You need to be able to edit them. You need to be able to control that. But we don't want to see that. We just want to hold the data for you in this time because there's one back end. Right. So we need a way to do that. And part of this proposal is to allow us to do that, create these arbitrary groups to allow us to encrypt data. And there's a standard I have for doing this. There's a way. I've already talked to cryptographers in our company about how we would actually achieve this. So there's a way we can do this. It's going to be part of the standard, and I'll publish the first draft, and then we can refine it and work out actually, how do we make this cool and useful. Right. So, but to do this, we're going to have to get wallet support, right? Wallets are going to have to help us out and actually do the signing, do the encryption, because they're the ones that hold the private keys. We don't want the private keys to leak into the DApp, because that's where we end up. That's how we get our security in these systems. All right. So again, we're going to want wallets to actually participate in this process and saying how these things need to look like, because ultimately they're the ones that have to support us to do these cool things. Right. So we've got a number of people in the community we want to bring into this process.
Speaking of leaking, the registration and voters and role base, none of that, or maybe this will be part of the new set, none of that stuff will live. They will all live in metadata, right? Which means they won't be accessible by smart contracts.
It doesn't have to. It does currently. It doesn't have to. I mean, there are limits to what you can do with
the datums.
Yeah, there are limits, but it is possible that we could, as part of the standard, and I haven't looked at this yet, but it is possible that we could reflect some of the metadata in the datums so that they could be used by smart contracts. And then part of the validation process for the transaction is, does the metadata actually be faithfully reflected in the datums? So yes, it's in the metadata, that's easy to consume. Is it in the datums? Yes. Do they match? Yes. Okay, so we can actually use that data in the smart contract, and we know that because that's what validates that transaction as far as the role-based is concerned. But this is something we can actually develop on and look at and work out together, right?
Yeah, some basic smart contract support opens up in the case of co-proposing. You could have that go into a fund with automatic distribution, if it can read that data and stuff like that too.
Exactly. Right. I mean, and this is another reason we want to do these transactions, right? So currently proposers, they have to provide us their keys, their addresses that they want to get paid out to if they win their proposal through side channels. If you register as a proposer on chain, your reward address is actually where we would pay you, right? If you register as a group of co-proposers, you would all have to have the same reward address because you all have to agree this is where we're going to get paid our rewards. Or in fact, you could register potentially with a couple of reward addresses, and similar to the original idea for DREPs, you could say, well, here's 3 reward addresses. This one gets 50%, this one gets 25, and this one gets 25. So the registration itself for a group could actually tell us, when we distribute rewards for this proposal, this is where it's going to go, and this is the proportional breakdown. So there's this sort of information I'd like to capture rather than us rely on side channels for sharing the data.
The backend, you say is that on in front 10? The backend proposal to decentralize the API.
Yes.
Is
So
that
we've got that's the ecosystem accelerator that effectively
Hermes?
lets us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the Hermes and the Athena stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a whole topic all its own. that's a big topic all of its own because it's quite a big project. But that is the second. That's, you know, like I said, that's the complementary project to this one, to actually say, well, let's actually decentralize these APIs. Now, if we did that without me addressing that, the APIs that we're defining in Catalyst now in the Cat data service we would have those same APIs exposed through Hermes and Athena. So whatever front ends we built now, with, you know, maybe just minor tweaks, would actually run in the decentralized back ends. They don't care that where the back end is, as long as it talks the same, you know, language to the front end, right? So that would be the aim there, is to make sure that those two align up, and and this is another reason for doing this role-based access control. If we decentralize the back end, there is no central source for authority. You have to have something like the blockchain where you can say, okay, I know who this is. I know what their roles are. I know that their data is accurate because they've signed it. So you need this to have somewhere central, you know, decentralized as well. And the blockchain is the perfect place for that.
How much of what's in this slide that you just shared that you're going to share is actually covered by this Ideascale replacement proposal?
All of it.
Okay.
I mean, the proposal digs into it a lot deeper. And this is just let's have a talk about this, and we can dig into this a lot more. So we can have a full session on the role-based access control if we want to. We can dig into different pieces of this. So the idea of this, you know, after town hall is just to give us a taster and an intro and start the conversation. And, you know,
so the new SIP would be covered and stuff like that too.
It talks about it, but, you know, exactly how many SIPs does talk about making this as SIPs, but exactly how many SIPs we want to make or how we break it down, that's actually something we should talk about as a community, and we need to involve the SIP editors, right? Because like SIP 62 has got a bunch of stuff in it, but kind of my feeling is I'd actually like it to be two different SIPs. I'd like there to be a SIP that deals with the signing of the data for the roles and the role-based stuff to be its own, you know, SIP extension to SIP 30, and then the voting stuff for Catalyst be its separate SIP extension, so that they're clearly, you know, this one's got to do with role-based access control. This one's got to do with signing votes, because votes are a special type of payload that the wallet needs to form, right? So, but we could put them in one SIP. So there's a tension there. Which is the right way? Should we put them in one? Should we make it two? So it's pretty hard for me to say, Darlington, how many SIPs. There's going to be at least a SIP that defines the specification for the metadata and the transaction itself. There's going to be, you know, SIP 62 or an enhancement to that, and maybe we bust SIP 62 into two SIPs so that it's better to implement for the wallets and clearer for other people to reuse. But, you know, at the very least, it's that. But, you know, maybe when we're looking at it and we're refining it, we think it should be 4 or 5. It doesn't really matter to me, as long as it's clear enough and we keep the SIPs constrained enough to solving one problem that they're easily reusable. All right, that's my main goal.
When you were talking earlier, I thought I was trying to find it in the proposal. I thought I heard you mention some interactions that wouldn't be anchored by a transaction. That would just be between the wallet and the interface. Did I hear that right? Or would every interaction be anchored by a transaction that involves signing?
No. So we have got so in my early work, and this is I need to revisit it based on where we're currently at, but in the Catalyst core repo, and we actually linked to it in one of these slides in in the bridging the gap slide at the end, we talk about this decentralized, it's kind of like JWT type tokens, but using this mechanism. So you would sign a long-lived token that would say to the back end, okay, you're this person, and it will last for a particular period of time. And that will give you a certain level of access, like read access, for example, or, give me data that's relevant to me. But it won't authorize you to edit your data, right? Necessarily. Then this is going to depend on what the APIs choose to do. But the idea here is that one is a lower level of access, right? So you can sign a JWT, you can do things with that, but if you want to actually do something critical like cast a vote, I wouldn't accept that for that. I'd want you to individually sign your vote, right? If you were, if it's editing a proposal, there's some argument about what level of security we want. Is the token acceptable, or should we be signing individual proposals? But that's the sort of thing we can actually discuss and have a conversation about where do we want to set the levels for security. But there is definitely the two different ones, a long-lived token to make it easy, so we're not signing every single time we click on a button on the interface. And another one that's secure that says this is categorically me and this is really what I wanted to do. All right. So, but what we do in each one of those, it's actually something we can define together. Because once we define that rule, all DApps will have to, all Catalyst front ends will have to obey the same rules, because the back ends will enforce it.
That makes sense. But that's not something the current, this is some of the future stuff, right? That will be covered with this proposal.
This is what we work out over in the first 3 months. And then as we build the APIs out and we specify the APIs in the next 2 stages, that's actually part of the community process that we'll bring in as well. We'll be like, okay, here's the API, and we can implement it in one way. We can use it, and then in testnet we can go, oh, actually, this is really a horrible experience. I have to sign it every 3 seconds. Then we can have discussions, and then we can tune the security so that we've still got good security, but we've still got good UX. Right. So that's
has hardware teams like Ledger and Trezor been part of some of these discussions so far? That's always been a sticky point for doing things that don't involve transactions.
So we have we do have a fairly regular sync with wallets. Obviously, we can't force anybody to come and talk to us, but we do have a regular sync basically every week with the wallet teams. And I have already raised some of this stuff with them, and there's already known deficiencies, say in SIP30 signed data. So we're actually going to try and address some of that in this design process to make it easy for the hardware wallets. For example, if you sign a huge payload, you're actually not signing a huge payload, you'll be signing the hash. Currently, what happens in SIP30, people do that now so that the hardware wallets can deal with it, except they only pass the hash to the wallet. And so then the wallet says, please user sign hash. And the user goes, I have no idea what that hash is, and I do not know if the data you want me to sign is accurate. What I want to do is instead say to the wallet, here's the payload, you create the hash. And so you can tell the wallet, so you put that work into the soft wallet. The soft wallet can actually, which interfaces to the hardware wallet, can actually create the hash, get the hardware wallet to sign it. And so you've got the DApp never tells the wallets the hash. Right, the software wallet can create the hash. It can display to the user, this is what you're going to sign. The hardware wallet can say, I'm signing this hash. You can validate the two against one another. But this is something that I'm going to be talking to the wallets more about. And in fact, this week I've got a meeting with them. We're going to start exploring this as well so that we can get this right. But yes, making sure that it's working well with the hardware wallets and software wallets is critical to this. Right, and making sure if there is updates they need to make, that they're within the scope of the capabilities of those devices. Ken's got a question.
Like the way that I've thought about this, like as far as how you interact, how you share information, and how you prove that you're the one who did the work. I sort of think of it like integrating something like version control, like Git or something similar to that. So like you have a hash that represents the current state of your work, and then you can have that the hash, and then like maybe a link to the data that's all you need to store on the blockchain, and then you have a much finer grained detail like how it proves your interaction. And it's just like doing a commit when you want to update what the blockchain is saying, like what's stored on the blockchain. Like it wouldn't need to be the data, like it would just be like, okay, we've done the work that we want to publish, that we've done this step, and then just the hash of whatever commits you did to the work you're doing.
Yeah, that's right. But because what we're dealing with here is what you're saying is exactly right, Ken, and that's where we're going with this. But because the data that we're talking about here for proposals and votes, even in Catalyst, they are actually off chain. So Catalyst is a layer 2 that runs beside the Cardano network. So all the registrations will be in the Cardano network. Payments are in the Cardano network, but the actual voting in Catalyst is conducted off chain. So we don't have the limits like you do in Cardano. You don't want to post a 200K proposal to the chain. That would just be crazy. But we can post 200K proposal to a back end that's signed. And in that case, what we would be signing there, Ken, is the hash. So that's exactly what you're saying, but we don't have to worry about, linking the external data. And one of the reasons we want to avoid that in something like Catalyst is because we don't want that external data to change. We want to know for the duration that we need it, that is the real data. It was signed. It's all perfectly validated and fully encapsulated. But you have the same issue, right? When you sign it in the wallet still needs to. Yep.
If you use a cryptographic hash,
yeah,
something that's secure for showing the state of your work, like the change log of your work, then that's provable that hash came from the data, from the state of the data.
Yeah, that's
like
that's exactly right.
Yeah, like you would need some, like as far as if you're using something specifically for submitting a proposal, the limitations on the scope of what you submit as an actual proposal is sort of separate from the idea of
precisely.
The hash of the data.
Yeah, exactly. But see, one of the problems with the SIP30 signed data is you can only just sign data. So people are saying, yes, we only want to sign the hash, and all they pass to the wallet is a pre-computed hash. But the flow is supposed to be, whether it be a hardware wallet or a software wallet, that anything the wallet is asked to sign, it's supposed to ask the user for validation. Is this what you want to sign? So in this case here, I want to be able to say, do you want to sign this thing as a voter, or whatever your role is, and for the wallet to be able to actually tell you you're signing this as a voter or as a proposer for Catalyst or as a reviewer. So I want it to be able to say, do you want to sign it as this? And this is the data you'll be signing, and this is the hash we computed for it. Because if the DApp or the external thing computes the hash, it could say to you, yes, you're going to sign this data, and send any old random hash to the wallet. And unless you're a particular kind of person, it's going to be very difficult for you to validate that the DApp isn't lying and isn't going to change your data and has just actually told the wallet to sign a hash for something you didn't want.
If they have access to the same app that you're, or the same interface, I don't see how it's possible to do that.
Because they're disconnected. So
if the data is stored in a public place, and like, I don't know, presumably you can store both the hash and link to the data itself.
Yeah,
on
but some of the
chain.
data is difficult to verify. So a perfect example of this is the vote. So the Catalyst votes are encrypted. Okay. So if we just signed the hash of an encrypted vote, I could show in my DApp, I could show the user, you're going to sign this vote that you're voting yes for this thing.
Okay.
But I could create an encrypted version of that voted no, hash that.
Okay.
Ask the wallet to sign it. Then I store in a public place the encrypted one that said no, and it's hashed. So they validate. Now, as a standard, as a general user, it's very difficult for me to know that the wallet that the DApp has actually changed my vote on me.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure about the actual votes. I'm more
as a general
on the information. Like yeah. How do you validate the timeline of information, and then the way that people interact with each other when they're building up information or knowledge bases. So
yeah, no, what you're saying is exactly right, and that's the sort of that's the way we want to go, because the hardware wallets then can deal with that quite easily. They can deal with signing hashes, but we want to take the responsibility for generating the hashes off the DApp so that that becomes a wallet concern, and so you're separating the concerns. And so while in most cases maybe there is never going to be an issue, if you separate the concerns, then it makes it even harder for there to be an issue, because they have to collude in order for data to be inadvertently signed or encrypted or whatever. All right. So the idea here is to and you've got to trust your wallet. If you don't, you've got no ADA. At the end of the day. So, Alex, that's got another question. Yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna have to bounce. If the Hermes proposal doesn't get funded,
yep.
Does everything you just presented still happen? The API, all that layer stuff. Okay.
Like I said, they're complementary, but they don't rely on one another.
Right.
So either or could get funded, and they're both able to be fully implemented. If
it's all the API stuff, all the back end for Catalyst Voices.
Yeah.
Is that going to live
it's part of the proposal?
Yes. In that Catalyst core repository?
Yeah, so in Catalyst Core now, we've got all the read access to the vast majority of the data that you would need to do an Ideascale replacement. We've got the proposal data, we've got a bunch of stuff. It's all read, right? And the reason for that is because we've got no permission system to allow you to write, because we've got no authentication system to allow you to write. All right. So the Catalyst Voices proposal for the back end is effectively, let's define the authorization system, then let's implement the right APIs that actually enforce that through those registrations. Then the back end will have the read and write functionality, and then we can implement the front ends on it. So that's all part of the Catalyst Voices stuff. The Hermes stuff, if it is up, we basically, Hermes itself is only going to deal with voting in the current iteration, so it doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff for writing proposals. It only has to cast votes. So that's the limit in the Hermes API, in the Hermes and Athena proposal. So there's no actual hard link. In a further step for Hermes, where we actually did fully decentralized proposals, then that would become an issue, right? And so we would have to say we didn't get Catalyst Voices, but we got Hermes only. In a future proposal, we might have to say, let's go and revisit this thing so we can do this decentralized access control, so we can do proposals. But if we've already done it in Voices, we just reuse that in Hermes. You don't have to do it again, right? So they're complementary, but they're not. There's nothing in them that actually, and we did that quite carefully to make sure that was the case. There's nothing in them that actually hard depends on one another.
So in this world of different interfaces talking to the same API. Do you know if, or is that still a decision point? How much real time protocol type things are you considering for the Kali Voices interface?
What do you mean in the terms in context
Like,
of
like any sort of WebSocket or streaming protocols, or like if someone could, one thing that used to happen in Ideascale, if you and two people editing the same proposal, like you will overwrite each other, or sometimes you might like delete even. Like that was a big problem in last fund. So I'm just wondering how we're gonna be what I would like to see happen potentially in my dream world of this different apps code proposal, Nirvana, is if you're editing something, the other app can tell that you're editing something, and potentially at some point you can see the edits in real time.
I mean, like I said, we haven't formalized the API.
Yeah. So that's okay.
But regardless of how we did it, we actually want to keep a version history.
Right.
So even if you did that, even if two people did do 2 edits, you would have both versions anyway. You would always have both. You wouldn't just have one, the latest. You would have, if you did an edit and your co-proposer did one 5 seconds later and they both went on, you'd have them both. So you would actually be able to do you could probably add a function to merge them or check them for differences because you've got both. So there's a couple of ways we could do that. But again, that's something we can actually, work out. We can actually look at that and say, okay, so how do we actually want to do this? Because you're right, that is an issue and it does need to be thought about. And so my initial instinct, we must always keep the versions, at least during, certain periods, right? Once you've submitted and say it's final, well, we probably don't need to keep the old versions. But while you're editing it, I want to keep the versions. Because often you do things and you're like, oh, I'm going to delete all that. And then you go, oh, hang on a second.
Right.
Tomorrow it's like, what did I say again? I want to say it. So we want to be able to go pull back, for you to be able to pull back your older versions. If you do that, co-editing and corrupting one another becomes less of a concern, even if you have to do a manual edit and go, oh, I'll go back to my version. I'll cut my thing out, paste it in the new one. You never kind of screw.
The version thing totally works. Any update on the data set that's in the current core? Earlier you said you can you can replace Ideascale now for read only, but we still don't have the details. Last time I checked, like 4 days ago or something.
That's because we're still working on the as you know, importing data reliably from Ideascale is difficult.
Yeah.
Right. And so for us to do that into Catalyst Core requires an Ideascale import. And while we have one, and while it works, the automation for it isn't quite currently working the way it needs to work. So that's actually on the agenda for being resolved in the next couple of days. But if it does get resolved, then you should get, right, in the next couple of days, you'll have live data in the Cat from testnet's Cat data service for Fund 10. Right, so that's coming. Right, we had hoped it would be today, but Ideascale sometimes does not like you and does not want.
Oh man, do I know? Well,
Right.
Thanks for the time, Stephen. This is great. Hopefully the proposal gets funded. Looking forward to.
Thanks, Darlington.
Yeah.
Has anybody else got any questions or anything they'd like to discuss related to this or in general that we can talk about?
We can probably pick up another question I did suggest in the chat that we keep the recording at about an hour, just so that it's also nice to the viewers post fact when they're going on YouTube and they don't have like this 2 hour jumbotron at them. But like if there's any other question I think be a good opportunity to ask. Otherwise, we can probably wind down the room and close out
Yep.
the recording shortly as well, so that you can also go
Joe's got
to
a
sleep
question.
soon. But
So
Joe,
let's say Joe's got the last official question, and then we can keep chatting while ever anybody wants to keep talking.
yeah, we can just
Awesome.
stop the recording and whatnot.
Thanks,
So-
Darren. Thanks, Daniel. So I'm not as technical as all you guys. However, what I'm interested in is, Stephen, at this point you're building for Project Catalyst Global, right? IOG and the whole Project Catalyst community. One of the reasons that I love this project is the opportunity at some point in the future, when we've onboarded a whole load of new people in Aotearoa to Catalyst, is to be running Catalyst Aotearoa, right, on a local level. So essentially reusing everything that you've created and doing it specifically for Aotearoa and probably specifically in another language, Te Reo Māori. So I just want to ask the question now and kind of flag all of those decisions that you're making are with the consideration that that is a very probable use case in the future.
Oh, 1,000%, yes. So every decision we're making about Catalyst is to make it more reusable in contexts that we're not even thinking about. So we want people to be able to reuse Catalyst in other contexts. You know, we envisage that you would be able to reuse Catalyst, say, with a native token as your voting power. We don't currently have all the tooling to enable that, but it's definitely use cases that we talk about often. I mean, Mike can attest to that. How many times have we had that conversation, Mike?
Almost every day.
Almost
Awesome.
every day, right? So, and part of, like I said, we haven't talked about it much here. We've touched on it, but part of the idea of the ecosystem accelerator is actually allowing that to be even easier. So for you to deploy Catalyst now, you have to stand up basically the back end that's going to do all of the voting stuff and all the data centralization, all the data management that every DApp has. And we've made that easier. So in the Catalyst core now, we've tried to make that so that it's very accessible and as it can be for a highly technical thing. But the other proposal is more targeted to actually allowing it to be, you can just say, I want to spin it up and I want it to be this way, and it's a completely separate system, even though it's running, isolated from Catalyst in your own context, with whatever rules you want. So that's kind of, we're definitely trying to get the technology to that state. So it is always in the forefront of our mind.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your work. I appreciate your service.
No problem.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate the community. So thanks, Joe. Robert.
Hey, how you guys doing? So just a broad question in reference to the voting process. You get the impression as if voting is only isolated to individuals who are directly involved with the Cardano community. And I was wondering, is there any way that we can go ahead and try, it's probably already, situated in that fashion, but if we can go ahead and, have an outreach to the general public and, have them come in and have an easier UI, UX, as far as the voting process, because essentially we are trying to reach out to other individuals. And that's why we're building these projects, to onboard more individuals onto the blockchain, onto Cardano specifically. And it gives the impression that it's an isolated community, members only type of thing, and not necessarily for the broad audience who may or may not be involved with blockchain. And I was wondering if any suggestions you have to try to change that.
Well, I mean, it's for Project Catalyst itself, it's kind of difficult, right? Because at one level, I've got two parts to my answer here. So, because it's kind of fundamental to Project Catalyst that it's the Cardano ecosystem, people in the Cardano ecosystem voting with their voting power that's tied to their ADA, and there's parameterization around that gets to choose how the catalyst, how the Cardano, part of the Cardano treasury gets spent in order to improve the ecosystem. So it is exactly what you say. It is like this community that's working with itself. But there's this other aspect of onboarding. Now that's really critical to us as well, and we've had long conversations about that. And part of the idea with the testnet is it's actually easy-ish for you to go and get, say, ADA from the faucet on pre-prod. So the idea with the testnet is not only to allow us to develop and to allow people to build with us, but it's also to help people on board, so that if somebody's like, this thing actually sounds pretty cool, where we can do these things, and we're getting, in Africa, we've done all these amazing, environmental projects, and it's all being funded through Catalyst. How do I get involved? Well, all you actually need is, 500 ADA. It's not a huge amount, but I don't want to spend 500 ADA. I don't want to get into the community for that until I actually know how to use the system. Okay, so come and play with it on testnet. Have a look at testnet. Have a look, make a voter's account on testnet. It doesn't cost you anything. You can go and get the money out of the faucet. And the idea here is we actually want to make it much easier to onboard, and we want to be able to improve that over time, iterate and make it so that, we do want to bring people in. They do have to have a kind of, a stake in the community in order to be able to vote, but we want to make that process of actually starting and exploring easy and free. So testnet's one of its primary use cases is exactly what you're saying, is to onboard people and to say, let's bring people in, let's get them involved, so we can sell it on the basis of, this is all the amazing things we've done. If you want to get involved, here, come and learn how. I mean, we have talked, blue sky stuff about, it'd be great if Project Catalyst could actually fund, education, teaching people how to actually use Project Catalyst. That doesn't have to be the Project Catalyst team. That would be fantastic if it was actually regional teams, and explain the value, explain how they could actually use that in their communities to provide value and to do things, or, the sky's the limit with that sort of stuff. So that's kind of where we want to take it and what we would like people to be able to do. So you're right.
My concern was, especially during the beginning stages and an infancy of Cardano and blockchain technology as a whole, I'm just concerned of creating this isolated community to where we're not, where we're only making the decisions from a technical standpoint, hypothetically speaking, and not necessarily taking into consideration the average potential user who could enjoy a lot of these projects that we have, but certain projects are not getting certain attention because it's only Cardano community members who are voting on certain projects and things of that nature, and not the mainstream individuals who would, have voted on other projects otherwise. That's all.
The other project that we've proposed, the Hermes and Athena project, it's actually, one way to describe that is decentralized layer 2 infrastructure for blockchains, and not necessarily just Cardano, and not even necessarily blockchains at all. So the idea in that is to be able to build apps that we could decentralize. They can use a blockchain. They don't have to use a blockchain. And part of the value add case for that is we actually would like to see, if this project goes live, we'd actually like to see people in Cardano, in Catalyst, actually building apps within this ecosystem that we with this engine, and they can build apps that actually don't need to use Cardano itself. So you could build this and it's fully decentralized. And the idea here is to make the UX so accessible that we are opening it up to these people who would otherwise go, this is really technical, I don't know how to set up a wallet, and I don't know how to do these things. So we want to use this as a way to say, well, here's actually this great application. We don't even have to call it a D app. It is decentralized, but here's this great application, and here's a use case you've got. And then they all go, as most people do, once they start using something, they go, oh, actually, they learn, they understand, a lot of those people end up becoming, active members of the community, and their participation grows. So part of the desire for the other proposal is to actually allow some of that stuff to happen as well, where you don't necessarily need to have ADA to participate, right? Or to use the fruits of what Project Catalyst has produced. We did have another question. I don't know if they dropped. Did that?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, if
Ken,
if
yep.
you're using the test net and you can potentially make NFTs on the test net and hand out the NFTs to people you want to participate in some voting event, if it doesn't have to involve money. Like if you know who you want to participate, you can do that.
Yep. And exactly. So this kind of extends on what Joe was saying. So we have also talked about, you know, voting power being produced by other means. So it could be by NFTs, for example, or, you know, not just native tokens. So, you know, and you could use testnet to actually do, you know, you've got a club and you want to run a small election for, you know, 20 people. You could actually just pre-mint them on testnet, as you know, Ken's saying, hand them out to your club members, and you could actually use the Cardano ecosystem, the Catalyst ecosystem, to run a small election to determine a particular outcome for your group. So it actually opens that up. There's security issues there. There's, you know, it's not as secure, but it's accessible, right? And so how do we make it more accessible? That's kind of what Catalyst Voices is talking about there, because we can, you know, we can make a special UX. So you could take one of the front ends, and you could actually trim it down and say, well, we don't need DREPs. We don't need these things. We want to brand it to look like what we need. We're going to trim the functionality down to what they need to use, and then that's it, right? So you can create, you know, special interfaces that just target what it is you're trying to do. So, you know, Catalyst ecosystem can do all this, but you only need to do this, right? That helps in getting people to use the system, and that's also a use case we're trying to support. Thanks, Ken. That's a really good idea. Right, it's a good example.
All right, awesome. So might I suggest for you, Stephen, maybe to close down the room for the recording? What are the call to actions and things of that nature? And then we can stop the recording and we can cut that part.
Okay. So, you know, we're going to have some more rooms over preceding town halls if you want to hear more about Athena and Hermes or testnet. We're proposing to talk about testnet next week, and then Hermes and Athena the week after, and then we're going to keep, you know, digging deeper into these topics, and we'll, you know, if you've got questions, you can post them to us, and, you know, hopefully by the time we get to voting, you can see the value proposition that we're offering, and you'll choose to support us. But, you know, we're here for the process, and we you know, we love Project Catalyst as well. So it's all good for us. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for watching.